Hi, everyone. Welcome back to this episode of the Ionavation Podcast. I'm your host, Adrian Vazquez, and with us on this special episode, we have Sisi Juarez, a former Iona alum, current Iona alum, and also a current English teacher at Seoul, South Korea. Sisi, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, thank you for having me.
And especially because, 11:30 in South Korea, right?
Yeah, 11:30.
Thank you so much again. I really do appreciate it. So, Cece, we'll jump right in. Tell us who you live about, who you are, your background, who really is Cece Juarez.
So my actual name is Melissa Juarez. But how I grew up, I usually got called nicknames. So it just kind of sticks with me.
Mhm.
So I was born and raised in Texas, actually, and then I moved to New York. And then I wanted to get into business, and Iona had like a really good business school. So I decided to attend, and I graduated in 2022.
Mhm. So, after you graduated for business degree and also your degree in entrepreneurship,
Mm.
why'd you get into teaching?
I didn't think I would end up in teaching at
Mhm.
all. It really like when you're about to graduate, anybody who's graduating, their mind is always like, what am I going to do after graduate? Where
Right.
am I going to get a job? Where can I apply? What can I do? And so when I was nearing graduation, I kept thinking of all of these possibilities and I kept trying to apply to all of these places, to these companies. But a part of me just kind of like couldn't accept the fact that I would have to work in New York. I
Mhm.
don't know why. So I was like, why don't I work outside of the state? So I tried to look for jobs outside of state, but of course, as a fresh graduate, it might be a little bit more difficult to get a job outside of state without having that prior experience. So then I started to look outside of the country,
Mhm.
and then I ended up in you can get a job as an English teacher to countries that are looking to hire native speakers to come and teach usually the younger generation to speak English for their future. So they start young and then they
Mhm.
just kind of raise them up to be fluent speakers. Most of them it's because they would like to go to the States to study or travel around the world without having that language barrier between them because English is becoming some sort of like universal language these days.
Mhm.
So I looked into that and they pay you to move to their country entirely.
Good deal. Yeah.
So they pay for, well, for me, they paid for my airfare.
Mhm.
They gave me an apartment. I started with my salary starter when I first moved here, but it increases every year.
Mhm. Yeah, I think what you touched upon with that is sort of pivoting, right? You pivoted, you saw your
Mhm.
circumstances, and you pivoted to the best option, which was getting an apartment, travel, and all of that at South Korea. But I wanted to also ask you, you have a family business in Texas, right?
I have family there who have businesses, and I always thought, why don't I just work with the family?
Mhm.
But I just, I guess for me, I'm too much in the core of I want to start from the bottom, from
Mhm.
scratch, from my own will. Even though I have family who have businesses down south, for me, it just like, I just wanted to start from the bottom to say, like, I made it here by my own. And if I make it big, then I can help my family, is kind of my thought process when I was thinking about that.
So you want that ownership over your work, essentially. Say like that I created my purpose and by building it up, basically. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think with that, right, I want to go into a little more about like South Korea, like as opposed to do the other countries have similar offers for you, like apartments and everything, and pay for working as an English teacher, or was it South Korea specifically that had this really nice package of benefits that encouraged you to move there as opposed to any other country?
So a lot of Asian countries are actually looking for English teachers.
Hmm.
So like there's Vietnam, there's the Philippines, But the big three, which are like very recognized, are China, Japan, and Korea.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was researching, trying to figure out where I would most fit or most benefit or be more convenient, I was debating over China and Korea. Between those three, during my research, it seemed like Korea and China were more at like the top choice due to
Mm-hmm.
their benefits and how they kind of treat their foreign teachers, basically. Um, but for China, their contracts are usually like you have to stay for maybe 3 years. And so for me, it seemed like a huge leap. Like even though I was deciding to work outside of the country, having to move there for 3 years on that contract wasn't in my decision making.
Mm-hmm.
Korea, on the other hand, has 1 year contracts. So I decided to do the 1 year contract because my thought was that if I did the 1 year,
Mm-hmm.
I would have established myself in Seoul, in Korea. And then I was going to apply to some of the universities to try to further my education and try to further this idea that I had created during my time at Iona.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I think that's a good option to weigh, and I also think maybe it was a little hard, right? There's some challenges involved with adjusting to Seoul life in Seoul. So I'm trying to think about this from like a perspective of like you were have familiar with Texas and New York, right? Then you
Yeah.
moved to Seoul, South Korea. What were some of the culture? Was there a culture shock? Were there some challenges involved with that? How did you adjust to life in the U.S. versus life in South Korea?
I have to be honest, when I first moved here, it was a bit difficult.
Hmm.
Um, I researched a lot before I moved here, which I think that it is something that it was because I was moving there, it is important to study where you're going. And
Right.
so I tried to learn the Korean language, which is only like 15 letters. So it's really easy to learn how to read. The problem is that even though I know how to read, I don't understand what I'm reading. So when I first moved here, in Seoul because I landed in the middle of Seoul. So it wasn't
Hmm.
outside of Seoul, I was in the city. So
Hmm.
you're more likely to bump into people who are more understanding of that language barrier. And so they try to use hand gestures to kind of communicate with you. So it was very easy for me to communicate with them, but it made it kind of difficult sometimes when I was trying to find things that I needed, or like I didn't know where these places were, or how do I get from here to here in terms of the subway. I luckily had a foreign teacher who was working at the school that I was first started at. She kind of
Hmm.
helped me get around, but then she then left like 2 weeks later, so I was on my own for the rest of the time. So I had to figure it out on my own. And so even though there are some subtitles to help you, it's not always going to be there. So
Hmm.
you really have to adapt to the language. And so you have to learn the language. And I learned it not by studying, I learned it by listening to other people and kind of
Hmm.
connecting the dots to what they were saying and how they responded. And so eventually I learned the typical phrases of how to get through the way. I think part of the culture shock was I cannot wear shoes at work.
Really?
I have to take off my shoes and wear sandals. Everybody does it. The children do it. They have their indoor shoes and their outdoor shoes. When they come into school, they got to change into their slippers. When they leave, they got to change their shoes. So we basically do the same thing.
Oh
And
wow.
the bowing. Oh, there's I've gotten so used to it now. Because there's like whenever you meet someone who is older than you or you're meeting someone new, you have to slightly bow as a sign of respect and as
Hmm.
a greeting. So I always catch myself accidentally bowing wherever I go. But in Korea it's normal. When I visit back the States, it's not normal. So sometimes they look at me and they're like, what is she doing? Why is she bowing? I think that was the only culture shock so far. Also,
Mhm.
there's the informal and formality. So when you speak to someone who's your same age, you can speak in like slang and get along and you're like friends. But if
Right.
a person is younger than you or older than you cannot consider them a friend. And you have to speak formally to them no matter what. Even if they're a year older than you still have
Right.
to speak formally to them. So, me being the youngest in the school, I have to speak formally all the time. So I don't get around it. I can only speak informally to the children, but I'm not allowed to speak Korean, so it's just pure English for them.
Wow, I mean, I think just touching the really want to emphasize there, like really immersing yourself in life there as opposed to just like reading about it, right? That's the beautiful thing about like learning a culture, learning a language. It's that you really live that experience, which then brings me perfectly right into my next point about while you're doing all of this, learning new language, new customs, you're also learning a new education system, right? So, can you tell us a little bit about your experience with the South Korea education system, and then could you perhaps compare like some similarities, some differences to what you experienced in your own education?
So I've been living in Korea for about 3 years and a half now,
Hmm.
and I have worked at a school before, at the school that I work now.
Hmm.
And so when I first joined that school, the director, or basically from what I've noticed, basically, the Korean education system is very focused on memorization.
Hmm.
So they may not understand what they learned or fully comprehend the context of the word. So they're just focused on memorizing the vocabulary. And then if you give them a test or you give them the work within that vocabulary, they will be able to do it. But the problem with that is that they start learn let's say the school that I work at, they're called hagwons. So they're
Hmm.
private English academies that the kids go when they're young to study English. They then learn English in elementary school and high school to prepare them for the college entrance exam. After that, once they've taken that test, if their career or major choice doesn't include English, they just kind of forget about it.
Hmm.
And so they don't know how to speak it, or they don't understand it, or they can't understand you if you speak very slow. So they spent those years studying English just to eventually not remember anything that they learned. So that was one of the things that like really stuck out to me because I have very bad memory. I don't have
I feel
that
you.
great of a memory.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a hit or miss. So when I tried to teach the students, I tried to teach them in a way that they could memorize it. But then some, of course, students have a different way of learning. They're all not going to learn the same way. So I had to
Exactly.
adapt and become creative and create new ways for them to remember those words. But as they were learning those words, they actually learned the context of the word. So then they started to use it in the vocabulary when they were speaking to me. And I was very like, oh, you got it. I'm like so proud of you that you got it. But one of the ways that I did that was becoming an artist.
Oh.
I had to draw scenarios or create a scenarios in the classroom of the vocabulary of the work that we were doing. So
Hmm.
whenever they thought of the vocabulary, they were like, oh, CC teacher did this. Oh, I remember this. And they just kind of connect dots each other.
Hmm.
When I was growing up, it was mostly just like the teacher's on the board, the teacher's talking on the board, they're writing everything on the board, and that's it. If you didn't get it, you're gonna have to figure it out on your own, kind of thing. That's what I remember.
Hmm.
Having to see the teacher always explaining, always talking, just talking, giving examples, and then they give you the worksheets and you just have to know how to do it. But for students who are not visual learners or auditory learners, it's very difficult for them to have that paper in front of them and then try to repeat the same process, because they look at it and they're like, I know she did this, but I don't understand how to do it on my own. So you really I had to be very creative and create all of these materials and be very energetic
Mm-hmm.
to have these students learn in an engaging manner instead of just that usual style that I grew up with. Although I am a quick learner, not everybody learns that way. And in my classrooms, I always have like those kids that listen and they're like, I got it. And then there's the other half of the class where they're like, I don't understand. So you have to be creative. And so it really it pushed the limits of my mindset and having to think outside of the box. So that's one of the things that I've noticed within like the differences between Korea and the States, because Korea is very, very focused on studying, very, very focused on like, they call it the pali pali culture. Pali pali means like quick, like hustle. You gotta hustle, you gotta
Oh,
work, you gotta move, you gotta do this. Students, the older they get, the longer they're studying in the academies. Like sometimes they finish at 7, or they could finish at 9 p.m. at night.
oh wow.
It can be intense.
Hmm. So I like how you touched upon the fact that not every student learns the same way. It's the same thing what we try to teach in entrepreneurship, where it's really a mindset thing, like a lifestyle, a mindset thing that's really fluid and depends on the person, as opposed to being just one rigid job or like profession. So then going back to your point, not everyone learns the same way, not everyone thinks the same way, and so you try to accommodate that in your learning style, which actually brings me to, I want to briefly talk about how your training in UAF, the University Innovation Fellows, actually may have influenced your teaching style. So, just for our audience, for their knowledge, could you explain what University Innovation Fellows is in terms of training, the purpose, etc.?
So the University Innovation Fellowship is in connection with the Stanford D School. And I was brought into this I became aware of the program by my friend Lily, who she was an MBA student at the time. And I think she saw something in me, and she just kind of recommended me into the Hynes Institute. At the time, the Hynes Institute was new, like just recently established. And so I believe Lily was the first cohort of the Iona. And so me and my other 3 companions were the second cohort, if I'm not
Mhm.
mistaken. Please, someone correct me if I'm wrong. Um, but I really like a challenge. I
Mhm.
really like pushing myself. And so I think during that time, it was COVID. I think like COVID was around.
Like
And
2020, 2021, right?
yeah, 2020. And so like I don't remember when I became a UF cohort, but it was during that time. And so I honestly, when she told me about this, I was very intrigued. So then I started to go to the Hynes Institute, took entrepreneurship classes, got recommended, and then went through the training program. And it really pushes your mindset.
Hmm.
For me, I think at the time I was very focused on the business structure of my degree. And so when I did the entrepreneurship, it was just like, oh, you're thinking of this? Why are you thinking about this? How would this work? If you see a future, where would it go? Do you
Hmm.
see a goal? Is there another, like, if you're thinking of a business idea or like an idea that has already been used, how can you make it better? why did that not work? How can you change it? Can you use the same idea but use a different approach? And it really was pushing through, and you had to do a lot of brainstorming, and you had to think of ideas, and you had to like work together and talk about it to try to find that main focus point, because sometimes when you think you have the problem, you weren't looking at it properly, that your problem then ends up changing. So now you have to find a different solution. But then again, it could always keep changing. There's always something, or maybe there was something that was brought in, and now you have to think about how to integrate that into what you have already built.
Mhm.
So when you, as a cohort yourself, and how you're trying to engage the Iona students and provide them with that support that they need, I remember me and my cohorts were really like, we had like a whole spreadsheet, and it was just like post-it notes all over everywhere that I was getting confused. And if I remember correctly, Juan Cadile, he created like this Iona app, like a prototype. And it was very interesting and intriguing. And so we were trying to like figure out how to use that. And when you go through that intensive training of, I believe, 8 weeks or 9 weeks,
Uh, 6 weeks, I think.
6 weeks,
Yeah.
that's that's even shorter than what I was thinking. 6 week of intensive training, it was like my my mind had been haywired
Mm-hmm.
to think outside of the box, and just kind of like, whenever I have an idea, just kind of overthink it to the max.
Mm-hmm.
And then we got to go to the Silicon Valley meetup, I think on the year that I was graduating. And I got to meet people from like all over the world. I got to hear their ideas, their like what they were building, what they were doing, how they wanted to target it. And I really connected with them, and I like went around talking to everybody and was like, where are you from? Where are you from? And so when you have that experience, and you have that mentality already ingrained in your brain from so much thinking, when I moved here, I was already thinking outside of the box. Like, even though there was a structure already built that I should have most likely followed, I
Mm-hmm.
still went outside of the box, but still maintained myself within that structure that was built. It's not the same manner or same style, but it works. So if it works, it works, basically.
Exactly. I like how you put it, outside the box. So you mentioned earlier you draw drawings associated with words. You accommodated multiple different types of learners. You didn't treat everyone as the same. And like you said, you thought outside the box while still being within the structure. So you pushed the limits a little bit, like you pushed the walls out, created more space to create that effective learning environment, which is absolutely the entrepreneurial mindset that UAF ingrains in its fellows. I think that brings me to what you mentioned earlier as well. You taught at two schools. Well, you're teaching a current school, but you also taught a school the first time. So, can you talk a little bit about why you decided to leave your first school, and then what you're doing at your second school, and how you brought over your learning style to that second school?
At my first school, there was, I kind of bonded with the teachers at that school, and
Mm-hmm.
I also bonded a lot with the students. They were the first to see my creativeness in its like full process, because
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't like, I was figuring out as I was going.
Mm-hmm.
And those kids were amazing, and they like surpassed expectations. But I came to Korea, so like I think it was like 4 months after graduation, I moved to Korea. Basically, I started in September, ended in June. Um, Usually, you can only stay in Korea if you have a contract with a school. So if your contract is ending or you end your contract, you're expected to leave the country a month after your contract ends.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was working at that school, due to reasons, I decided to end the contract myself. And so I was like, what do I do now? Do I go back to New York and find a job? Or do I find a job here in Korea? And one of my coworkers who worked with me at the school had bought her own school outside of Seoul in Paju,
Mm-hmm.
which is not far but close to the border of North Korea. And
Okay.
so she had she found out that I had decided to leave the school, and she contacted me and she said, "Would you like to see my school?" And so I went to her school and I saw it, and we just kind of had a discussion, realized that we shared the same mindset, the same goals that we were thinking of at the time in terms of the Korean education.
Mm-hmm.
And so she offered me a job and I took it. So I moved to Paju here, and I've been working here ever since at this school with her. And we just kind of use these unique teaching style that I have basically tried, that I basically made during my time at the first hub one. And
Mm-hmm.
so we implemented that at the school that we were at. And so it showed a lot of results, and it provided a lot of evidence and information, and it was just like an eye opener, like, oh, this works. The students are not only learning, they're they are learning the context of words, they're putting it in their vocabulary, they're able to write paragraphs, write grammar sentences perfectly. They can communicate with you and express their thoughts fluently without having to struggle and think, oh, how do I say this in English because I only know it in Korean? So it really showed that if we can have these students make English become their actual second language, not just learn it because they have to, make it a part of them, make it ingrained in their mind. And so it was amazing to see how these kids, because they're very young, how these kids were able to learn a second language and sound pretty fluent as like a full native speaker. I'm pretty sure some of them have my New York accent that I have that I didn't know I had. And we have a teacher from England, and some of the kids now have a British accent. And it's really interesting to see that. And I really like how you can see their shift from like, I'm just gonna stick to the sentences that I know in English, like, can I drink some water? Or I'm very tired, I'm very hungry, or like, teacher, the homework was very hard, to suddenly joking around and changing their tone and like laughing and telling their stories in a manner of a native speaker. So when it comes to the Korean language, I think sometimes they don't know what tone is. Like when they speak, they just have like that one single tone. So they don't understand what sarcasm is.
Oh.
So it's very different. When you speak to a Korean, you try to joke around and they're like, I don't get it. Why was it funny? I don't understand. Right? But the children, they've adapted to that tone. So when I'm being sarcastic, they're like, teacher, please stop. Or they respond to me in sarcasm as well. And I'm like, look at you. Where did you learn that? Kind of
Hmm.
thing. So it's really interesting how like it somehow their personality just kind of shifts. I I think that some of my students don't even see me as a teacher anymore. I think I'm like an older sister at this point. And it's just like very interesting to see that shift from their like new learners to like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm learning, but I'm going to pretend that I'm learning, to suddenly being like, oh, teacher, I already know this word. It's a synonym for this word. You don't have to tell me. I'm like, but I have to teach it to you anyway. So we're going to learn it together.
I like I think going back to the beginning, it's exactly what you said. Building up from the ground up. You did that exactly for second school. And in some ways you took a risk and it paid off. You really made your passion your teaching, which I think it speaks exactly to entrepreneurship, making your interests really your business, your hobby, or whatever activity you're doing. That's exactly what entrepreneurship gets at, really. And so, on the topic of entrepreneurship, to close out this entire podcast, what's one piece of advice that you want to give our audience and aspiring entrepreneurs, including maybe a younger version of yourself when you were first starting out on your journey, not sure what to do or considering your options?
I have this favorite quote that kind of sticks to me all the time. It just like randomly pops into my head. I
Hmm.
think it's from Francis Assisi, if I remember correctly, where it basically says like, first do what you can, then do what is possible, and you're already doing the impossible.
That's a good quote.
And so it really, when I feel like I'm very tired and exhausted, or I'm like, have run out of ideas, what do I do now? I'm like, okay, let me think, let me stop, let me take some rest. I think that's kind of something that sometimes people forget when they're trying to build something from scratch, or just build something within a company or somewhere. We're all trying to steady ourselves and build ourselves and just make ourselves implement ourselves into the life that we have chosen or the career that we have chosen. And so I think when it comes to that, you just have to rest. Just think about it. If you have something, an idea or anything like that, and then you're really in work mode and you get to it, and then eventually you're like, oh, I'm like, I can't. I'm like stuck, or I'm tired, or I'm like, what is it, burnt out. And
Right.
so, like, when I was switching schools and I didn't know what I was going to do or what was happening, I was just like, okay, let me take a breather. I did what I've never met anyone who has done what I've done, to just randomly pick up after graduation and then move to a different country that you don't even know the language, don't know the culture, the customs, or anything like that. But I did it. And I'm like, that's a pat in the back. Like, congratulate yourself for that. You did it. And it can be something big or it can be something small. Like, I made a new contact with this new person. That is already a pat in the back, right? And for me, I'm slightly an introvert. No, I am an introvert. I
I
like staying
100%
home.
agree with that one.
I like staying home. And so whenever I got to actually put myself out of that boundary and make a connection, you get amazing opportunities. Like when I met Lily, became a part of the UIF, got into the entrepreneurship classes, and I created this idea that even now I'm still thinking about and I'm still trying to pursue, slowly using what I have learned so far, because I still have my information in my slideshow that I've made, my prototype. I still have that and I update it whenever I create new ideas or when I think about something new, or I'm like, oh, you know what? I never thought about this. Let me go back. And I think that when you're trying so hard, you really need to just take some time for yourself. The ideas or any thought process, would just like randomly pop up. Even if you're just having lunch with a friend, suddenly it'll just like pass through your brain and you're like, oh, that is actually something that I should pursue. And then you just kind of start from there. Like go out, take time by yourself. Don't be afraid to be by yourself, kind of.
Mhm.
Don't be afraid to make connections. Do research. That's also a good thing to do. Research, because there might be something out there that kind of taps into what you're doing, and you might be able to use that as a guide. That's what I've done so far. I've been here for 3 years and a half, and every time I'm like, I think I'm done. I'm tired. Maybe I should just go back to New York. I've gained experience in a different country, but then there's just there's something here that I want to pursue, that I want to push. And I realized that by wandering around, just walking, just thinking. And I'm like, no, I know what I want now, or like, I know what I want to do. Let me keep doing that. But if something unexpected happens, I might just do it.
Right. 100%. I like that you touched upon experimenting, trying out different things, because you only really know what you don't like and you like if you try it. So I think when you put perfectly, and also giving yourself grace, right? When you do try something and you fail, or it doesn't go how you wanted it to, give yourself that grace to continue. And that is exactly what you've told us today, Cece. Thank you so much. Now, Cece, just for our viewers as well, how can they reach out to you and keep in contact if they want to ask you more about your experience, get advice from you, all of that good stuff?
Well, you can reach out to me on my LinkedIn.
Hmm.
Can reach out to me by email and my Instagram as well. Just randomly contact me. I always look at everything, my emails, everything. I try to keep in contact with people that I know, especially at Iona. I will be here to help you. Think of me as the recruiter. I will assist you with everything, with the process. Because when I did it, I was all by myself. I didn't have that assistance. When I first started, my
Hmm.
recruiter was just like, okay, get this documentation, go here, get it approved, and then send it to me. And I was like, okay, I know I know what I need, but I need more of that details,
Guidance?
more care, more guidance.
Hmm.
And then once I landed here in Korea, gone. They were just gone. I didn't get like, they recommended me like, maybe you should research Korea or anything, but they weren't an actual active guide, which is what something that I would have like appreciated. Someone who was there to guide me, or at least like quote unquote train me as to like, here are some things that maybe you should be aware of, or you should remember, or you should know, instead of having to find out through my own research. I want to do what my recruiter didn't do for me,
Hmm.
basically. Like, so if you were to reach out to me, decide that you want to come to Korea, I will be there every single step of the way. I'll even pick you up at the airport. I'll have everything prepared for you.
So you want to pay it forward, basically. That's what I got from that. You want to pay it forward, give some of the experience or the support that you may not have had yourself, basically.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So you heard her from Cece herself. Reach out to her on Instagram, LinkedIn. We'll have all that good stuff in the description of this video. If you want to get into contact, be sure to reach out to her. Thank you again, Cece, so much for being on this podcast, especially at this time. Um, I've been your host, Adrian Vazquez, on this latest episode of the Ionavation Podcast. Please like and subscribe on YouTube for more episodes and follow us on Instagram at the Hynes Institute. And I'll see you in the next one.
Thank you.